I'm Sharon Bagatell, and I'm really excited that there are just so many people out here who are interested in this enormous topic of climate change and what to do about it. We've way exceeded our expectations for registrations for this webinar, so yay for you. A little bit about me. A while back, I was an elementary school teacher, and while I taught just about everything, I was really drawn to working with children on environmental issues. I've been and still am a bicycle advocate, a farmer, a permaculture teacher and designer. I'm a mother of two and a grandmother to 4 very special little ones. In the past years, and partly because of my little grandchildren, I've become a climate activist. I'm the leader of the Northeast Missouri Citizens Climate Lobby chapter, and I'm a trained climate leader for the Climate Reality Project. I'm also the education coordinator at Dancing Rabbit Ecovillage, and I welcome you to our online education series. I'm talking to you from my off-the-grid, earth-sheltered home that I built with my partner Dennis, and I welcome you to my home as well. So this is my Ecovillage. 65 people living on 280 acres in rural northeast Missouri. We intend to grow to the size of a small town, 500 to 1,000 people. We've been living with carbon consciousness for 18 years now. We've experimented, questioned, learned, tweaked, revised, tried again, and we've actually found ways to live low carbon lifestyles and still have a high quality of life. We think that a lot of what we've learned is also useful to others, like you. We understand that not everyone who cares about the planet can just jump up and move to an eco-village. So that's why we call this webinar series, How to Live Like an Eco-Villager. In other words, wherever you are, you can do these things too. We're excited to connect with all of you through this online education series. A quick reminder that tonight, and with all of our webinars, we ask you to hold your questions to the end. After my talk, Illy will moderate a short question and answer session. The other full-length webinars are designed to allow for in-depth Q&A. And if you register for the whole series of webinars, you'll have even more opportunities to ask questions at our final hour and a half Q&A with villagers bonus webinar at the end of the series. Also, with each webinar, including this one, there's an accompanying learning guide and resource list. Feel free to use the document as you wish to guide or deepen your learning. So tonight, my talk is called Ecovillage Answers to the Climate Crisis. 10 ways to shift from angst to action. Now, my work as an environmental educator and climate activist, I've found that contrary to popular belief, the great majority of my fellow humans really do care about the planet they live on, and they really do care about our changing climate. Each have their own unique perspective on what's going on. I found that most people either simply don't know what to do about what's happening, it's complicated, and they don't know where to put their energy to make changes, or they're somewhat paralyzed by the enormity of the situation. They feel small, powerless, and ineffective. I'm wondering if any of you find yourself in either of these categories. How empowered do you feel to do something about climate change? Many of us feel overwhelmed at the very least. This is huge. We're talking about the planet. My goal tonight is to offer you ways to empower yourself to move from overwhelm to meaningful action. We all find ourselves in different circumstances and with different passions. What I'm offering is a kind of menu of options. You can pick and choose what calls to you. The important part, I believe, is that we each and every one of us take some action on climate change. But before we get to those 10 ways to make that shift, let's get on the same page about climate change. Or more aptly put, I think, the climate crisis. You've likely heard the word carbon bandied about. Carbon dioxide, carbon footprint, carbon sequestration, carbon pricing, post-carbon era. What are we really talking about? Here's a quick explanation using slides from the Climate Reality Project, an organization that trains people to give powerful talks on the realities of climate change. It's listed in your resource list if you're interested in finding out more. So even though you might know the basic science of climate change, I think these slides give us a powerful starting point for deepening our understanding of what's going on. So here's the basic Earth science. Solar radiation in the form of light waves passes through the atmosphere. Most of this radiation is absorbed by the Earth and warms it. Some energy is radiated back into space by the Earth in the form of infrared waves. And some of this outgoing infrared radiation is trapped by the Earth's atmosphere and adds more warmth, as a greenhouse does. This thickening blanket of atmosphere has been created by the intense release of gases called greenhouse gases. There are many greenhouse gases, but the one that is primarily emitted through human activities is carbon dioxide, CO2. According to the EPA, in 2013, carbon dioxide made up 82% of all the greenhouse gases in the United States. And what is the primary source of carbon dioxide release? Yep, fossil fuels. The stuff that was buried for so long that we've been pulling out of the earth and burning at exponentially increasing rates. Here we see a steady increase from 1850 on, and then a huge jump since the 1970s. Okay, and now for the angst. Here's a chart of 200 years of CO2 and global temperatures. Notice the correlation of temperatures rising just as CO2 rises. Well, some folks say, yes, but we still have winter in many areas of the world. That's true. But that's not what we're talking about when we say the climate is warming. Here on this chart, we see a typical bell curve in summertime temperatures from 1951 to 1980. Average, colder than average, warmer than average. Life in the 1950s was rather average. Now let's jump to the last decade. We see that, yes, there are colder than average temperatures still, but not as much. And we see not only more above average, but now we have recordings of extreme temperature events, shown in the really dark red here. This is way beyond the average. And here's a look at what this might feel like in the United States. This graph shows what average temperatures have been in the summer in some states, including where I live in Missouri. It's indicated in red. And this is what's predicted. All of these states will have a 10-degree Fahrenheit jump in overall average summer temperatures. That means that Missouri, where I live, is going to feel hotter than Arizona and Texas do now. And all of this heat, where does it go? A whopping 90% of it ends up being absorbed into the oceans, warming the waters, which among other things, significantly changes weather patterns. Take a moment to take this in. Global warming is contributing to an increased incidence of extreme weather because the environment in which all storms form has changed from human activities. This, quite honestly, is a piece I wasn't getting. This isn't a localized thing. This is a change in the entire global system of weather. All storms are now different. We're talking about the conditions that create storms like hurricanes and typhoons. We're also talking about floods and drought and fire. Because guess what? It's all connected. So we had Hurricane Sandy in 2012, which devastated parts of the East Coast, including flooding in Manhattan. And near where I live, we had flooding in 2008. Now, this isn't your usual spring overflow of the Mississippi River. This was June. This was different. 24 people were killed, and being an agricultural area, this storm had huge economic impacts. Just 2 weeks ago, we saw severe flooding in South Carolina and Texas before that. Around the world, we're seeing floods of epic proportions. And it's not just that there's lots of rain. It's that it comes in intense downpours. Over a foot of rain in 24 hours. Imagine that. See, warmer air can hold more water vapor. So the storms build up and build up and build up, and then they let loose. I was actually in Malawi when this devastating flood happened earlier this year. Killed 176 people and displaced thousands who were already at subsistence level. At that time, I saw it as a horrible, isolated weather event. I didn't quite connect the dots. I didn't see it for what it really is, a part of a global change in weather patterns. And it's not just rain. Snow is precipitation too. The extreme snow in the United States Northeast is completely part of this pattern. Drought is another piece. The warmer air holds more moisture, so it takes longer for clouds to reach the bursting point. And in many parts of the world, we've seen prolonged droughts. I imagine we all know about California. And then when it did rain last week, it wreaked havoc because the ground was so hard packed, it couldn't absorb the downpour. This is happening in many parts of the world with extreme repercussions on food production. And with all the dryness comes fires. Consider the intensity of the wildfires in Alaska, Canada, and the US Northwest this past summer. This is happening all over the world. Russia, Australia, Chile. And with those fires comes the release of even more carbon dioxide. I could go on and on and on about the far-ranging impacts of heat, flood, fires, and drought on food supplies, health, infrastructure, political stability, the future of island nations, and species endangerment. But I think I'll stop there. Have you had enough angst? And now for the good news. Are we really able to meet energy needs through renewables? On the left, you see projections for wind power generation made 15 years ago. As of last year, that estimate was exceeded by 12 times. And this was a projection for the growth of solar as a viable source of energy. In 2015, numbers are showing the capacity will be exceeded by, take a guess, 62 times. The wind and solar industries are alive and well. In fact, the renewable energy industry is a strong and growing source of employment in the US and around the world. Now let's look at the money it takes to power these changes. Investments in renewables have surpassed investments in fossil fuels. Pretty amazing. And check this out. The green dots here show new coal plants that have been proposed and not built. The orange dots show old plants that have actually been retired. And the blue dots show existing coal plants that are going to be retired. All of these huge carbon emitters canceled. And in August of this year, the EPA finalized the Clean Power Plan. In a nutshell, the plan sets national standards to reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 32% from 2005 levels by the year 2030. Each state is given a different emissions reduction goal, as shown in the map here. And each state has various options for hitting its target. Of course, there are folks that see this as heavy federal regulation and are working to challenge this in the courts. Shortly after the Clean Power Plan was announced, China announced its new national plan for curbing carbon emissions in the form of a national cap-and-trade program. On the science side, there's even a glimmer of hope. Global emissions of carbon dioxide actually stayed flat last year. The first time that's happened without an accompanying economic crash. And political will is building. Religious leaders, including Pope Francis, framing climate change as a moral issue. People who haven't been drawn to environmental issues for one reason or another may now see climate change in a very different way. This is no longer a fringe, hippie, tree hugger thing. This is truly, as the Pope says in his encyclical, about all of us. For those of us in the US, a small but very significant political thing happened a few weeks ago. Representative Chris Gibson of New York introduced a House resolution acknowledging climate change as human-made and stating that Congress needs to do something about it. The thing is, Chris Gibson is a Republican, and he has 10 other Republicans already signing on to the resolution. This means climate change is not just a Democratic Party issue, it's a bipartisan issue. This is a huge step forward. And finally, the agreements coming out of the global climate talks in Paris in 2015 were actually more ambitious than most had anticipated. 195 countries agreed to work to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius rather than the 2 degrees that had long been the general target. This shift is viewed as essential for the survival of island nations already disappearing from sea level rise, and for avoiding some of the worst consequences of climate change I've already mentioned. While the agreement alone isn't enough, it was widely viewed as a turning point in global recognition that all of the nations on the planet must and can work together to avert disaster. So, is there a global shift happening? I think so. And I truly believe that you can be a part of it. So let's go back now to my goal for tonight. It's to offer ways that you can shift so that you can be part of this larger global shift. I'm going to share with you now 10 areas of personal action. All of them are ways that I and folks in my village actively engage in this kind of work. The first 5 ways will be covered in much more depth in the full webinar series. The others are things we do and want you to know about, but we won't be covering them deeply in the rest of the webinar. Let's start from that deeply personal space, your stomach. Some of this is about diet change. You've probably heard about that. But there's a whole lot more to it. It's more about setting up a carbon-efficient food system for yourself. So your homework, should you choose to do some, is to choose 3 really doable ways you can shift your own food patterns. Next week, longtime Dancing Rabbit residents Sarah Peters and Ted Sterling will share with you strategies for making that happen. In their webinar, The Carbon Efficient Kitchen, they'll talk about diet choices, seasonal foods, organic and local foods, collective buying, reducing waste, and actually reclaiming waste, as well as ways to cook low or no carbon. With years of in-the-kitchen experience, Sarah and Ted will take you way beyond online footprint calculators. Action number 2, be at home with low carbon. Many of us at Dancing Rabbit have had the exciting opportunity to design and build our own low-carbon homes. Billy and I have both done that. We've carefully chosen our materials, often natural materials such as strong clay. Our homes face to the south to allow solar warming, and we have solar panels and wind turbines. We design in ways to keep our carbon footprints really low. In our 3rd webinar, we'll share lots about that. Now, I know that many of you aren't about to design and build your dream house, but there are many ways to take the home you currently live in and redesign its energy systems. Now, please don't get scared by the word design. I'm talking about very, very simple things that can make a big difference. For your homework, identify 3 simple changes you can make to redesign your home energy use. I'm talking about things like ways to heat less space, retrofitting windows to bring in the power of the sun, using the sun to heat water, tweaking your lighting to be more efficient. Things you can do in a house, an apartment, or wherever you dwell. Action number 3, use less stuff. Can any of you relate to that? Ours is a culture that has traditionally really liked its stuff. Some research shows that there's actually more carbon that's gone into the stuff you buy, what we call the embodied energy, than in your actual carbon emissions. So ask yourself, what 3 things in your home could you do without? And make the leap. Do without them. I have to say, at Dancing Rabbit, I think we are truly experts at this. Our homes are really small, so we have to have less stuff. In webinar 3, we'll take you through the process of assessing your stuff. Sometimes it's hard to find where to begin. We'll share about buying strategies and about creating a way to exchange stuff with others so you don't actually have to keep on buying. Dennis Hoffarth is an engineer and a home builder with 25 years of experience living carbon consciously. He also happens to be my partner. In webinar 3, At Home with Carbon Conscious Living, he'll share with you some unique perspectives on home size and design, home heating and cooling, electric systems, low or no carbon tools, low carbon transportation, and living with less stuff. Action number 4 is all about that wonderful kindergarten skill, sharing. Not what you usually find in lists on reducing your carbon footprint, right? But when you share what you actually need, less stuff. And there are a myriad of other benefits too. Your homework is to find 3 ways to share joyfully with others. Our webinar 4 is called How to Create a Successful Co-op, sharing your table, tools, and transportation. Dancing Rabbit resident Cobb Carlton has wonderful stories to tell about sharing. And as a leader and participant in many of the Ecovillage's co-ops, he'll share his expertise on creating and maintaining cooperatives. He'll talk about the carbon value of having shared physical infrastructure when possible. And he'll give you ideas for creating informal sharing arrangements among friends, coworkers, or neighbors. Action 5 is what I call the hidden gem you didn't know you were looking for, cooperation. It's super important to make the physical changes we've been talking about, but at Dancing Rabbit, we've learned that if we're really going to make deep, long-lasting changes, we need a culture that supports cooperation. As humans, we really do need to work together. And while yes, we learned this in kindergarten, how much do we really practice it? Does our current culture support that? Does your view of the world lead you to compete or cooperate? Living and working together at Dancing Rabbit, we get lots of practice with cooperation. Maikwe Ludwig has lived in community for 20 years. She's not only practiced cooperation, but she's broken it down into a series of learnable skills. Maikwe will present webinar 5, Building Skills for Cooperative Culture. She'll cover including social skills as an integral part of sustainability, comparing the competitive and cooperative paradigms, and relearning skills for cooperation. So far, in summary, actions 1 to 5 are about lifestyle changes. If each of us can make lifestyle changes to live low carbon and high quality lives, we've actually created a low carbon culture. And I'd suggest that right now we need that and more. The science seems to say that we have a narrow window of opportunity to turn this Earth ship around. So many of us at Dancing Rabbit are actively engaged in additional ways to take action. And here are some of them. Action number 6, sequester carbon. Sequestering carbon means capturing carbon gas and storing it to keep it from going into the atmosphere and adding to our greenhouse blanket. This might scream of high technology, big towers, big machines, but I'm talking simple, really simple. So simple, I believe that every one of you can commit an act of sequestration soon. The best device for capturing carbon is a tree. They're made of carbon. According to the Center for Urban Forests, a single silver maple can trap nearly 25,000 pounds of carbon dioxide in a 55-year period. Gardeners and farmers can sequester carbon simply by building good soil. What is a key ingredient in fertile soil? Organic matter. And what is organic matter? Carbon. Any organic farmer is a carbon farmer. Check out the growing field of carbon farming. And finally, biochar. Biochar is essentially wood burned in a way that maintains the carbon in it, as in charcoal. When this charcoal is mixed with nutrients and put in the soil, it both adds fertility and keeps the carbon locked up for extended periods of time. Dennis will actually tell you more about biochar in webinar 3. Action 7. Use your economic power. Climate change is, of course, an environmental issue, but it's also an economic issue. You can use your economic power to help redirect money from fossil fuels to renewable energy, from large extractive corporations to localized businesses. Your homework is to choose 2 ways to redirect your money and your energy. Here are some of those ways. Divestment has been a powerful tool to effect change. It's been used to change the way tobacco companies have advertised. It was used to bring down apartheid in South Africa. It's being used now to send a signal to the oil and coal companies that investors don't want to support what they're doing. Fossil fuels are a risk for investors and for the planet. Recently, the California legislature passed the first state divestment law. The whole state of California is divesting from coal. And where might that money go? Well, quite possibly into renewable energy. The more investors put money into renewables, the more those low and no carbon sources of energy will thrive, become economically competitive, and attractive to a broad spectrum of folks. And there are groups out there who are seeing the bigger picture, seeking to build alternatives to the current extractive economic system that has brought us to this place. Dancing Rabbit is deep in the thick of this right now as we look at building a vibrant village economy. Number 8, get politically involved. Yeah, I know. This is an area where many of us feel, politics. I don't know. I'm not political. But like it or not, big decisions now lie in the hands of the global political systems. We must make an impact here too. Believe me, politics was not my thing. But I found myself suddenly quite passionate about stepping up and finding my voice. It's actually very empowering. Many folks at Dancing Rabbit are really jumping into this kind of activism. It's a natural extension of what we're all about. So your homework is to push your edge, find your political voice. So where to start? Well, you can start by simply letting your elected officials know that you're concerned. Write letters, call their offices, put climate change front and center on their radar. They really don't know you care. until you tell them. There's also a lot going on politically in the US with renewable energy. Because of the Clean Power Plan, states are really focusing on their energy portfolios. There may be legislation proposed to either ease the way for renewables or make it more difficult, depending on the politics of your area. If state and local level goings on is more your thing, then here's where you can jump in. I've personally chosen to work at the national level with a group called Citizens Climate Lobby, or CCL. As I mentioned, it's been an amazingly empowering experience. CCL applies communication skills I've learned in my Ecovillage life to the political arena. I've felt very supported as I've educated myself and found my voice. I wouldn't be giving this webinar right now if it hadn't been for CCL. Citizens Climate Lobby's focus is on a carbon fee and dividend legislative proposal. Basically, it puts a fee on carbon at the source, the port, well, or mine. That fee gets distributed equally to households as a dividend. That means money in your pocket. The increasing price of carbon fuels makes renewables more economically attractive. It's a market-based solution rooted in conservative economics. It's something that conservatives in Congress could actually buy into. Carbon fee and dividend is projected to create 2.8 million jobs, largely in the renewable energy sector, over 20 years. And it's projected to decrease greenhouse gases by 52% below 1990 levels. Far more than EPA regulations seek to do. I'm really excited about this as a real potential for change. You can find out more about it on the CCL website listed on your resource page. Action number 9. Join with others. This issue is about the ecology of our planet. It's interconnected with everything we know. And so there are many, many groups bringing different perspectives to it. I urge you to find a group that matches your skills, your passions, your perspectives, and find your collective voice. You can connect with environmental organizations and renewable energy organizations. There are climate change action organizations, environmental justice organizations, and faith-based organizations. I'm just delighted to see the many and varied religious groups that have dedicated themselves to climate change issues. Catholics, evangelicals, Jews, Muslims, the list goes on and on. You can find more in the resource list I've provided. And of course, you can connect with what eco-villages like Dancing Rabbit are doing. Which brings us to Action 10. Register for How to Live Like an Ecovillager, webinars 2 to 6. If you haven't already, register now for the webinar series. Learn more about creating not just a low-carbon home for yourself, but a low-carbon, high-quality culture for all of us. Because it's really about our collective home. It's about our planet. Thank you.
So Joshua wants to know, how do you reconcile the information you just shared about carbon fees with messages from climate activists like Naomi Klein, who argue that capitalism is the major force promoting climate change in the first place? Sharon, would you like to?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. It's one we talk about a lot here at Dancing Rabbit. The way that I see it is that, sure, capitalism has created this very extractive culture which has gotten us into this mess. But we're pretty much on the brink here, and we've got to do something fast to turn this ship around. And so I think if we come up with things like carbon fee and dividend, which a broad spectrum of people can buy into and benefit from, who wouldn't normally be excited about, let's say, bringing down capitalism. I think that we can do that first and make the focus first, mitigating all the crisis. And then we will see through getting through this, that yes, we must change our economic system. It's just a longer term kind of thing. I hope that answers your question.
Great. And Clint wants to know, how do you avoid planned obsolescence when buying electronics and batteries, specifically lithium-ion and solar deep cycle batteries?
I am going to defer to Dennis Hoffarth in webinar number 3 to talk more about planned obsolescence. I think he's got a deeper take on that.
And then Janie wants to know, will I be able to share this seminar number 1 with my local fellow activists?
We hope you do. Absolutely. We are just absolutely delighted to have this go be spread. And so yes, if you want to have a party or whatever way that you can do this to share the work that we're doing at Dancing Rabbit on behalf of the planet, go for it.
Asks, how can I donate to this work in Dancing Rabbit?
Oh, well. Yeah, Dancing Rabbit is a nonprofit, Dancing Rabbit Incorporated. And so you can go to our website, dancingrabbit.org, and click on the link to make a donation. We gratefully accept your donations. Thank you so much.
I have another question coming in that says, what's the cradle-to-grave carbon cost of wind turbines versus other energy sources versus just not using the energy, if you see it?
Excellent, deep question. I am not a numbers person, so I can't give you the numbers specifically. At Dancing Rabbit, we look at the full spectrum, and many of us actually do choose to go no electricity, and we look at using that electricity in very, very thoughtful ways. So, so that speaks to the last part, not just not using the energy. I think that's an important thing, is really looking at our lifestyles and reducing the amount of energy we actually need, and not trying to provide the same amount of energy that we're used to having. As far as costs, are you talking? I don't know if you're talking about cost in terms of money or in terms of the environment. I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Let's move on. Steve wants to know, can you speak a little bit about how to go about obtaining a land trust? Maybe this is covered in another webinar.
Cobb Carlton is the secretary of our land trust, and he will be speaking in webinar number 4. He knows all the ins and outs about that, so I highly recommend you take that one.
And Joshua asked about the wind turbine question. He was actually asking the environmental cost of actually producing
a turbine. Got it. Okay.
Embodied energy.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. There's embodied energy in producing wind turbines. I don't have the numbers. That is something that I could look up for you and find out.
How would someone get a hold of you if they want to ask you questions separate from this?
Through the Dancing Rabbit website. If you email dancingrabbit@ic.org and direct a question towards me, an email towards me, then I will get that.
Karen wants to know, will the slides be available to share? They would be great for my school-based garden program.
Oh, I love it. That's my thing. Yes, if you get the replay of this webinar, you can certainly use that with whatever group you'd like, particularly children.
Dancing Rabbit is trying to expand. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Dancing Rabbit's trying to expand in our population, if that's what you mean. Yeah, it was in our original mission to grow to the size of a small town or village. And we're looking at 500 to 1,000 people. So we are looking to grow in our populations, and our village will be changing. We've already changed our village to some extent as our population has grown from an original 6 to 65. We have a slightly different way of doing our governance here. And as we grow larger, we'll need to continue to look at how our lives change and how our structures change a bit to accommodate that number of people.
Someone's asked, are yurts allowed in the village? Maybe answer the, yeah. Go ahead.
Are yurts allowed in the village? We have had some yurts here. We do have a covenant about lumber, and we build or use lumber that is reclaimed, recycled, or locally grown. So generally a yurt needs to have that sort of lumber used to build it.
And we've got another question. Can you explain why Dancing Rabbit has gone with a grid system over individual battery systems? Are you all your local lines direct current?
Okay, Dancing Rabbit was off-grid for about 15 years or so. And we made, as a community, we made a decision to do a grid tie. So we have some of our village is tied into the grid. We have solar panels that produce power that goes into the grid, and we have an agreement that we put twice as much clean energy into the grid as we take out from the grid. So the reasons for that were concerned about batteries. We were coming to the end of the life of a large set of batteries for our common house. And we talked a lot about externalizing the costs, the environmental costs of batteries, and had a few other economic reasons for making that switch. And it was a decision of the community, and people like myself have chosen not to connect to that grid. So we can all make those choices ourselves about how we want to obtain our electricity.
Someone else wants to know about the cost relationship, the advantages of tying into the grid when your batteries fail, and how sometimes that's an issue.
Sure. We, as a community, decided to tie into the grid because we wanted to have some of the people here make their living in ways that they need some reliable electricity. And we were experiencing some short periods of time during the year when we didn't have that kind of ongoing electricity. So we made the choice to tie into the grid, to use grid power when we need it in those circumstances. But the good thing is that we're putting in year-round, we're putting in lots of clean energy into the system when the sun is shining, which is a good part of the year.
So someone else is asking, what are the requirements for joining Dancing Rabbit as a community member?
Okay. Well, there is a process. We have, usually people come and they visit for some amount of time, either through our visitor program or through a work exchange program, or a visit of some sort. And then if they think this might be a place they want to try out, then they can apply for what we call residency. And a resident can live here like a villager and get to know if it's really a good fit for that individual person, whether it works out socially and economically and spiritually and all the ways that people want to have their needs met. And we will also see if it's a good fit for us in our community. And if so, then people can apply for membership at the 6-month mark.
I think we've gone through some great questions. Thank you so much for asking them. It was really, really useful. Again, Stephen or somebody else that just asked that question about what's coming up next in the village. If you're interested in actually coming here as a visitor, check out our visitor program. Go to dancingrabbit.org, navigate to the visitors program section there, and you can explore the whole thing. There's some great videos that show you what it's like, and we encourage you to come and check out the village firsthand. We've got room to expand, and we'd love to see you here.